All right. So welcome, everyone. I'm Lauren Andrasky. I'm the program director at the Posner Center for International Development. And as I mentioned, this session was originally scheduled as part of our 2022 symposium. So I wanted to welcome you with a little bit of that context for the original container for this session before we continue on. So luckily, Heron and Deana were able to reschedule. And in fact, the fact that this is coming after the symposium is actually nice, as it adds a little bit of momentum to the week and a half symposium that we had back in November. And the theme on that was decolonizing beyond the buzz, as I know not all of you actually joined the symposium itself this year. So welcome. I'd like to begin, if my slides are where they're supposed to be, with the Posner Center's land acknowledgement. So if you'd like, you can close your eyes, put your feet flat on the floor, find something around you that connects you to the land. Maybe you have a plant nearby or something else related to nature that helps you kind of make that connection to the land. We acknowledge that the Posner Center sits on land stolen from the Cheyenne and Arapaho peoples, and acknowledge all 48 Indigenous tribes and nations who call Colorado home. Please take a moment to privately honor the original people who were stewards of the land in your place, acknowledging the sacrifices, hardships, traditions, and joy that have led us here today. Thank you. I also want to share our community agreements. These were created for the symposium. So we ask that over the next hour, that you're present in joining us, that you're courteous, respectful, and patient, and that you listen with an open mind. If you hear things that challenge existing beliefs that you have, to keep your mind open and engage in respectful conversation. To tackle the problem, not the person. Think, why am I talking or not talking? Using our nice little acronym WAIT. Speak for yourself using I statements. Assume best intentions while also attending to any impacts that your behaviors or things that you've said have had. Use contribution, not attribution, and expect and embrace discomfort and non-closure, especially when we're talking about things like decolonization. These are worth keeping in mind so that we can do this work together in community. To share a little bit more context of how this session fits into the overall symposium, I wanted to share a recap of just a couple of minutes on the symposium so that you could get a sense of kind of the overall picture that this session also fits into. So enjoy.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 2022 Posner Center Symposium, Decolonizing Beyond the Buzz. Can I just get us to go, whoop, whoop? There we go. All right.
We are Rebel Spirit Collective, and our work is expanding the web of storytellers and stories.
I'm excited, as always, to be at a Posner Center anything. Why are we so focused? Why are we trying to understand even what the word, decolonization means? To build shared understanding around concepts, I think is valuable because then I think it allows us to work together.
I am excited to be here to share my experience, but at the same time, learn from all of you and see how best we can all decolonize feminism in Africa.
My purpose today is to share alternative views of life, indigenous ways of imagining what is possible.
So I invite you all to think about whatever part of the world you're in, what are the healing practices that already existed within your community? It doesn't have to be talk therapy. It can be whatever it is that your community already does for healing.
We focus on solutions that enhance collective well-being for our partners over a long period of time. So we also ensure that communities also feel totally involved in the implementations of projects that they want to implement together. And this is not a privilege, this is a right for communities.
I'm going to talk about the history of colonization in Nigeria. Now, when we talk about the positives, religion, the Christian missionaries taught the people how to read and write in English so that they can read the Bible.
One thing we know in speaking is that language denotes the culture and an identity of a people.
And as Africans, we need to embrace this. We need to embrace our languages. We need to embrace our cultures, even as we do public speaking.
Being able to sit with someone and truly hearing their story is both healing for the person saying it and healing for the person hearing it. And we must tell our stories in order for us to reclaim them.
All right. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to today's presenters, starting with Deana. So I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Lauren. It's good to be here with some of you that were at the symposium. I'm sorry that we weren't joining you then. It looked like it was a really fabulous event. So today, thank you again for hosting us and for being here. Some of you, it's quite late at night. And so we're grateful to be here with you. So Haku Lia, Lina Hilkenta, Klekenhi Kalapuya Ilahi, Kapanish Molohi, Tipa Shumawish, Shumawish. So today we're going to introduce ourselves. We're going to ask you to, I think Lauren already had you introduce yourselves in the chat, but we're also going to speak about where we are, whose lands we're in, and if you haven't done that already, we'll have a prompt for you in a moment. We're going to talk about how we define decolonization at Live Oak, unpack this theory of applied decolonization that I've developed, and how we seek to do that work here in our organization. We're gonna give you a case study of how we're currently doing that work with one of our clients. We'll have you break into small groups to talk about how you're applying these principles in your current work. And then we will talk about some of the things that some of the offerings we're doing currently in terms of training, and then we will share some final thoughts and invite you to share some final thoughts. So that's our agenda for this next hour. So whose lands are we currently on? I just said in my introduction that I am currently in the lands of the Kalapuya. There are descendants. This is territory that was occupied by people who are now enrolled at the Confederated Tribes of Siletz and Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, but largely Kalapuya folks in the Willamette Valley and in this in Eugene, where we're currently situated. These lands were also utilized by the folks who are now enrolled at Confederated Tribes of Kuslo, Ramqua, and Sayusla, and also Warm Springs. So who are the people of this place is a question that I suspect most of you on this call are conscious of and aware of why we acknowledge the people of the land and how we do that. A native land acknowledgement has essentially evolved to be utilized by organizations and institutions. However, acknowledging the people of the land is a protocol that Indigenous people have been doing since time immemorial. When we visit a place that is not our own homelands, we introduce ourselves, and the host introduces themselves, and we do that because we want to make sure that we're not in danger, right? Or that and we want to let our host community know that they're not in danger, that we're here, you know, to be friends, to trade, and so we've always done that. And in recent decades, we have done that publicly at conferences and other convenings, and it has become it became a very public thing, the acknowledging, you know, who we are and who they are, and so institutions started picking up on that and saying, hey, we recognize that we're occupying conquered lands, and you know, and some have adopted a formal land acknowledgement, as the Posner Center has. What we talk about at Live Oak is moving from a land acknowledgement to a statement of accountability. So it's not just a performative, we recognize that we are in conquered lands, we are occupying these conquered lands, we're doing our business in conquered lands. And these are the people who used to be here, and these are the people who are here now. If the land acknowledgement even does that. Many don't. Many just say we're in Kalapuya lands. We at Live Oak talk about how we're in service to the people of the land and the land itself. So that's we're seeing a trend, and we're part of that trend in moving from the performative, just acknowledging the land and the people of the land to these are the resources that we're making available to the land and the people of the land to restore balance in this place that we all call home now. And as the Posner Center had an image, we encourage people to use the Native Land app. It's such a great resource. You can download it onto your phone, and anywhere you are in North America and beyond, even now, you can just ask whose lands you're on, and you can learn, you know, what language was spoken there, who are the acknowledged tribes, the federally recognized groups, who, you know, was there historically. So that's a bit about we're in the lands of the Kalapuya and the Siletz, Warm Springs, Grand Ronde, Coos, Laurent Kwasayusla. And we are in service to those people and in dialogue with those people. Oh, how did I skipped the intro slide here. Sorry about that. I went right into, now acknowledging the lands is important and probably should go first, but let's introduce who we are. So I did introduce myself in Smuwich, the Chumash language for the coast of my homelands, which is Malibu in the south to San Luis Obispo in the north of Southern California. And I am the founding director of Live Oak Consulting, a small business in Eugene, Oregon, although we serve organizations nationally, thanks to Zoom and commercial airlines. And I received my PhD from the University of Oregon and have held appointments at the University of Washington, the Portland Art Museum, the Northwest Indian College, and a couple of other small museums. And I serve as a consultant now to these mainstream, predominantly white institutions to help them develop relationships with tribal groups and Native stakeholders. And we've developed a set of trainings that help those institutions to decolonize, and we're going to unpack what we mean by that term here in a minute. Yeah, I'm a mother of a beautiful 17-year-old woman, and we're horse girls here in the Northwest now, far away from our tribal homelands, but we're kind of transplanted at this point. Over to you, Heron.
Thanks, Deana. Hi, everybody. I am very pleased to be here with you. My name is Heron Brae, and I was born and raised here in Kalapuya Ila'i, or Kalapuya land. And my people come mostly from Western Europe and immigrated. Many of them immigrated a long time ago to the Americas with all kinds of different histories there. And also many generations ago, some of them, my ancestors connected and joined with the indigenous people of Ojibwe people from the Great Lakes region. And so though I'm coming to you today as, you know, with a white identity, raised in a white culture and from the settler background, my heritage and my history points to a history that's very common in the US, where indigenous people married into white families to survive the colonization and to, you know, find safety and assimilation. And so I think that I speak to that part of my history just to acknowledge that. And it's important not to hide it, and also just to share all of myself with you in that, in all the complexity of how we all carry the stories of colonization in our lineages in different ways. And not here pretending to be anything other than how I was born, or you know, what I was raised as. So I think that's a lot of what I bring here to this work, is my own journey, my personal journey with reckoning with how colonization has affected me and my family, and the really extreme amount of isolation that my white family has felt from each other and from the land, and this disconnection, which I think on a personal level is a lot of what, you know, I'm here to address, and what we need to work on to heal, to come together, to find solutions to colonization together. So a lot of I've done that through emotional work, and also through my work connecting with plants and the native landscape and taking care of plants in the wild. So that's my background. Oh, and so thank you all for introducing yourself already. I wanted to, well, first I wanted to say that I love seeing people's faces on the Zoom while I'm talking, and I understand that people don't want to have their cameras on for all kinds of reasons, and that's completely fine if you want to keep your camera off for any reason that is important to you. But if you're willing to leave your camera, to bring your camera on, it's so nice to feel like, oh, there's humans I'm talking to, and we're in a room of people, even though there's a screen here. So thank you. Yeah, it's really helpful as a presenter to see your faces. I love it. Thanks. So if you would also love to, if you would like to put in the chat anything additionally to introduce yourself, that's great. We would love to know if you have, if you are Indigenous to the Americas, or if you are not, or if you are Indigenous to the land where you're living now. That also would be a wonderful thing to know, just about who's in the room, who we're speaking to here today. Great.
Thanks, Heron. Yeah, and to Heron's point too, it's important to recognize that this it's this idea of settler Indigenous is a very complex issue, and we recognize that. And also to note that the fact that Heron and I co-facilitate, that a person who identifies as Indigenous and a person who identifies as non-Indigenous or settler or ally is something specific to Live Oak as well. It's really important, we feel, to be able to speak to the both sides of that spectrum of, you know, colonial impacts. And so so we regularly do these trainings with an Indigenous facilitator and a non-Indigenous facilitator. Go ahead, Heron.
Okay, great. Okay, so we are assuming that this group is well versed in understanding what colonization is and the damages that colonization has done on a global scale. And so we're kind of skipping that that's normally where we start, is unpacking what happens, what is colonization, but we just want to hop right to talking to what is decolonization in just assuming your kind of base knowledge here. Which is so great to be able to do that. So I love this quote here from Syed Hussain, who's from Toronto, Canada. Decolonization is a dramatic reimagining of relationships with the land, people, and the state, one that prioritizes Indigenous knowledge, goals, and values. And much of this requires study. It requires conversation. It is a practice. It is an unlearning. So this really speaks to the kind of humility that we are, bringing into trying to understand what true decolonization means. And obviously, I think it's easy for those of us who've done a little work here to understand how the larger structures that we live in our society, like the nation states and the corporations, are very much shaped by colonization and colonial framework. And this graphic here describes all these different levels, from the individual and the systemic, that colonization affects, because these structures and these institutions are made up of people, of human beings. Each one of us individually have been affected by colonization, and we carry the kind of messages and the kind of subconscious patternings of colonial ideology just in our bodies and in our emotions, in our minds. And so when we're talking about decolonization, it's important that we kind of look at all these levels: the individual, which is our own inner experience and our history; the interpersonal, how we interact with each other; the institutional, how our organizations are shaped by colonization; and the structural, the larger systems of society. And really unweave all of these things and not leave any of them out. And the individual work really supports the undoing and the decolonization on the larger structural levels. And if you skip the inner individual and the interpersonal work, we really won't be successful at the systemic structural decolonization that we need to do.
Thanks. That was a great unpacking of the way that it shows up. And so over the course of the last 30 or so years, I've been working in different facets of mostly mainstream institutions, and with a museum background and an anthropologist background, museums and other organizations that represent Native people. And while those organizations are charged with representing and also being in conversation with Native people, as Heron pointed out, a lot of those people haven't done their own personal work, and so they have a notion to change things structurally. But what you find is that, and my experience inside those institutions is that it was really alienating and hard for a Native person to be hired and brought in as a change maker when there were a lot of people internally that weren't ready to change or hadn't done their own work. And so and that kind of encountering regularly folks that are kind of blind to the larger structural issues makes it hard on those Indigenous people. There are a growing number of Indigenous people who are being asked to help those organizations change. It's really important that that those institutions collectively and individually are committed to doing the work. So in our work at Live Oak, we approach this recognizing that there are actually 3 stages that need to occur for an organization or an institution to really move in a direction of decolonization. Now, I have many colleagues, Indigenous Native colleagues, who believe that there is no such thing as decolonization and kind of scoff at the term. And for good reason, right? How can you actually remove or extract the impacts of colonization? Can you? Is it even possible? We don't know. But what we believe at Live Oak is that we can make decolonizing interventions. We can intervene and create a different atmosphere where sensitization and relationships and a movement in the direction can occur. But from my experience, I've developed this theory of applied decolonization, that it really requires a systematic or a sustainable change really requires these three tenets. So one is to unsettle Western practice and consider alternatives, right? Just start recognizing that the Western paradigm is faulty, is problematic, and start kind of churning up those ideas and making space for alternatives. And as Heron mentioned, this requires a lot of humility, right? It requires that folks say, I'm willing to say I don't know how the world works, or how things should go, right? Maybe my worldview is a little bit skewed and not working so well for not only the people of the planet, but the planet itself. And that if we keep operating as we have been as a society, things are going to come to a really grinding, painful halt. So unsettling that thinking, and as we're doing that, we're starting to bridge relationships with Indigenous people, starting to learn about the history and cultures of the place in which we live. We're beginning to forge relationships with those people, recognizing that we have resources available to those people to try to restore balance, and we're leveraging those resources, putting them out there, and in an effort, a really humble effort to develop relationships and to restore sovereignty in these places where we live. And then it's necessary to anchor those values, those goals, an Indigenous agenda really in policy. If for any of these new ideas to continue, they really have to be rooted in policy. And those policies can be as simple as every time we begin a project, we create a Native Advisory Board. We pay those people. We go out to them. We make their inclusion easy and seamless. In an effort to because we recognize the value of including this group of people that have been excluded historically. So we're going to unpack a case study, a project that Heron and I have been working on for about 1.5 years now, called the Upper Willamette Stewardship Network Tribal Partnerships and Decolonization Initiative. And we're hoping that this case study will show you what these concepts look like in practice. So the first thing that we did with this group of people is to ground the thinking in local history and practice by starting with Decolonization 101 training and some additional online modules where we engaged with not only non-native land stewards, but the native people of this place, and facilitated dialogue. We demystified the term decolonization, right, by talking about what colonization looked like in this particular place and nationally, and what we're talking about when we're talking about decolonization. We're just talking about creating space for Native people to have some authority over how their lands are cared for. We engaged with those non-native land steward practitioners about the privilege they hold personally and that their organizations hold in terms of the privilege to take care of these lands and to have, have decision-making power over how the lands are used, and then their own personal privilege too. We asked them to really examine the settler privilege, not white privilege necessarily, but settler privilege, the privileges that they enjoy that the native people of Western Oregon do not, as a result of being indigenous, having been forced off of their lands, having their children taken to boarding schools, just the multitude of impacts that they have experienced that has put them at a disadvantage in terms of their authority and their sovereignty in this place. So educating everyone to alleviate fears and misconceptions about Indigenous people so that they can more effectively engage with those people, and helping them to be humble guests, strong allies for Native people, and ongoing decolonizing agents in the world. And maybe most importantly, showing folks how to provide support for Native people who are literally doing the bulk of this decolonization work, right? They're the ones who are who are constantly educating non-Native people about who they are and their goals and values, and even more so now than ever, as there's been kind of a bandwagon resulting from the Black Lives Matter movement, and also Standing Rock protests that got a lot of media visibility. There are a lot of organizations that want to do this work. So it's the Native communities are really shouldering a huge part of that burden. This 101 training is it's limited, right? It's only a beginning. There are many obstacles to true decolonization, as the folks on this call probably are well aware of. This is a very rigid and ingrained worldview, and so even talking to some folks about dismantling it is met with a lot of resistance. So the real work depends in this Decol 101 and beyond. The real work depends upon you and your willingness to start dismantling some of those old ideas. And it's also important to recognize that there are barriers to real work because of the institutional barriers that might exist, historical barriers that might exist in your organizations. So these are the things that we convey to the Upper Willamette Stewardship Network, and that we convey in our Decol 101 trainings. The module series, I started speaking about that on the last slide, but the module series was, there were 4 online modules, and then there were 6 or 7, I don't remember, Heron, field modules where folks got to actually be on the land, in dialogue, land stewards, non-Native land stewards, and Native people talking about, what's best for the land, how can we bridge these understandings for the benefit of the people and the land. So essentially what we did was we created the container over the course of the 4 introductory modules, speaking about conservation and colonization, past and present, tribal sovereignty and governance, and how important it is to engage with the local federally recognized tribe, as well as additional Native stakeholders. Returning land power and access to Native people and the value of that, and the necessity of that work. And then we started exploring on the ground this culturally grounded habitat restoration and planning, managing archaeologically significant sites. Anyway, you can read the rest, but speaking about fire and just helping the group ground themselves in traditional ecological knowledge, Native knowledge, goals, and values through the course of this year-long project. Go ahead, Heron.
Great. So after that process, the people involved in the Upper Willamette Stewardship Network, you know, in conversation with us, started asking, well, how can we ground this new learning into policy so that it doesn't just go away as we hire new people, staff turnover, or, you know, because all of our staff wasn't able to participate in this big learning journey together. How do we kind of really make agreements with each other? That's what policy is. It's a solid agreement that you decide, you know, that you're going to act on into the future. And so, while policy can be kind of a rigid thing in our in the kind of the colonial system, it's important because you're taking the time to communicate thoroughly enough that you all agree to do something a certain way. So to do that, we are now in the process of, there's a separate committee called the Tribal Partnerships and Decolonization Forum. And that group has created a charter, which is an agreement about how that group will operate with each other and with the network, and kind of the role of that group and kind of the authority or the decision making around this work, that they're really the leaders of the network in doing this decolonizing work. And then, and that committee is then leading a network-wide process to come up with a shared agreement that all of the 5 organizations in this network can really get behind to prioritize Native goals and values and collaboration in this land stewardship work. What can everybody agree on that is around kind of shifting priorities for the organizations and how they care for land. And so we're just starting that process this year in having those conversations about making this shared agreement. And as part of that, though, the organizations have fundraised for and created an ongoing full-time staff position for a tribal liaison, and that person will be a communicator and liaison between the federally recognized tribes and the stewardship network, as a way to streamline communication and have thorough communication, so that it's not a burden on the tribes that with all these people clamoring to try to get attention to do the important work, you know. So it's with streamlining communication. And yeah, we're hoping that this ongoing commitment and kind of a decision about how to do this work will lead for better outcomes for Native people in our community, and also for the land itself, and being able to integrate Native values into how land is restored and cared for with Native people at the center.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So we are going to have a little opportunity for you all to discuss with each other. And if for so we're going to send you into breakout rooms here in a minute. And if for some reason you do not want to go to a breakout room, for whatever reason, if you can't do this for 10, 12 minutes or something, that's completely fine. I don't know, Lauren, would it work if they raised their hand if they didn't want to go into a breakout room? And could you start them that way?
I'll just put everybody in, and if you can't, you can just ignore the request to join a breakout group.
Okay.
Or if you end up in one, that's fine. Go ahead and rejoin the main session.
Yeah, you can just,
and that'll be just fine. Otherwise, it'll take me at least 10 minutes to sort people properly. So
Yeah.
I'd rather you just ignore the request, and that'll be fine.
That sounds good. Well, why don't you make breakout rooms of 4 people then? So then if like a person or 2 doesn't join, it'll still be fine. Okay, cool. So here's some questions. Deana, would you be willing to copy paste those questions into the chat box? Because
already done.
Oh, you did it. Thank you, Lauren. Awesome. You're awesome. So our questions are, in what ways does your work already exemplify the principles of applied decolonization, personally and professionally? So we assume in this question that you all are doing decolonizing work already. And there's probably aspects of your work that kind of reflect this framework that we've laid out already. And so it might be useful or interesting to reflect on kind of what you're doing and how it fits into these 3 stages. Or you could discuss, how do you imagine applying the principles to help you strategize, organize, or deepen your effectiveness in your work? And you could choose either one of those questions. And really, we'd like to just allow each person in the breakout room about 3 minutes to just reflect and talk about your own experience, and then make sure that everybody gets a chance to talk uninterrupted for a few minutes. And then you can discuss together at the end if you have more time. That's how we would propose. And let's see, let's see, if we send them for 12 minutes, that'll only give us like 5 minutes at the end, Deana. So, but let's do it. Yeah.
It's fine.
12 minutes sounds good. And maybe just like a 30-second buffer coming back. Cool. And do you have the principles of applied decolonization that you could pop in the chat too, Deana?
If we just consider that the first one is disrupting Western ideals, the second is reintegrating Indigenous ideals, and the third is anchoring it in policy. So disrupt, reintegrate, anchor.
Awesome. Beautiful. Thank you, Lauren. All right.
I'll go ahead and open those. And again, feel free to ignore the request if you aren't able to join, but we would love to have you join these conversations.
Smiles, that's really nice. We hope you had a really good connection with each other. It's so important that we get to have these dialogues. If we had more time, we would love to have a lively discussion and hear from you, but we don't. So I want to invite you to just put, if you want any reflections or highlights from your talk together, things that you gleaned, we would love to see that in the chat. And we will definitely take time to read them carefully later. And, it'll just be good to share that conversation with you all. So yeah, we'd love to see that. But I'm going to pass it back to you, Deana, to finish us up.
Yeah, we can't wait to read the chat. I'm eager to hear. This is such a unique group to be presenting to, people who are already intimately familiar with decolonization. So it'll be fun to hear what you talked about in your groups. So yeah, right. So and if you found as you were talking about the decolonization efforts currently underway in your life and your workplace, if you found that you were lacking, we want to make sure that you know about some of the things that we offer in terms of training and experiences to engage with other people who are doing this work, other decolonization warriors. So we talked briefly about the Decolonization 101, Intro to Native American Cultural Competence. We are offering that monthly as an open enrollment, but we also offer it to organizations where we do a pre and post Zoom call with your leadership to talk about how you want to tailor the training, and then the post is about how to anchor some of the things that we've talked about in your policy, exploring those possibilities. The 102 is Principles of Allyship, the many ways that you can really show up as an ally in your work and also in your personal life. And then Practicing Allyship Infinity Groups, which is a 4-week learning journey, 2 hours a week, where you are part of a dialogue that Heron actually facilitates to talk about, what are some of the pitfalls to standing up as an ally? What are some of the fears and, apprehension around considering yourself an ally. What does it even mean, and what does it look like in practice? So it's a longer, deep, more in-depth, smaller, intimate group that gets to explore those ideas. And then we've also developed a shorter training that will help your organization move from a statement of accountability, from a land acknowledgement to a statement of accountability. So basically from performance to action. And then we're currently in developing our decolonization as an online module that will be sort of an on-demand training that you can purchase online and participate in at you know, on your own schedule. It'll have a workbook, and we're in the process of editing those right now. And then we also are developing alongside a piece of policy that I've just helped to develop for the American Alliance of Museums, a standards of excellence for museums with Native American collections. And it's going to have a substantial integrating decolonizing practice into policy for museums specifically. So if you're interested in any of those, our website is down at the bottom. And if you're interested in going a little deeper with us in terms of the principles of decolonization and you know what we've talked about here in a 3-hour online training, it is April 7th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I think Heron also dropped that in the chat. Yes.
Links in the chat. Yeah.
Awesome. The link is in the chat if you're interested. Also, our website has all the information. So no matter where you live, you're on Indigenous land, right? And that is true for the whole world. Though we work primarily in the United States, we recognize that everywhere in the US and North America is Indigenous lands. And that decolonization work, some final thoughts, is really a need for local connection. And it really requires that humility to follow the lead of the land, like paying attention to what the land needs. And we suggest that it is probably necessary to be in communication, in dialogue, in relationship with the people of the land to really understand the history and the significance of these places. Those people who have been in relationship with these places for thousands of years or since time immemorial. There's energy in each of those places, right? And the people of those places really embody that energy and carry the responsibility and accountability of those places forward in their work, in their relationships with each other, their community efforts. How do you center your work to create immediate and tangible benefits to the land and the people of the land where you live and breathe? And so we leave you with that question, you know, is there currently a practice that's important to you that is about centering the people of the land to restore balance to the place in which you lived? It's easy for us to talk about these notions of decolonization in a theoretical way, and it's entirely different to actually put it into practice and to live your life in a way that is the life of a decolonizing warrior or a decolonization warrior. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Lauren, for providing us this opportunity. Heron and I are now members of the Posner Center, and so we're your colleagues, your partners in decolonization, and so feel free to reach out to us for any reason at all. I'm sorry we didn't get to hear much from you. An hour is a very short amount of time to talk about such a big topic.
Sure thing.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Heron and Deana. Big round of applause for both of you. So thanks for being here today. This has been wonderful. And I think also thanks for your grace to reschedule this session and still be part of the now very extended symposium, which is wonderful. So thanks everyone, and hopefully we'll see you all soon.
Thank you. We really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thanks, everybody.
Look forward to more conversation.